On the second page of the argument, the column on the left, this entire column here is logos. This is Friedman making a logical comparison between what is already accepted, paid for uses of the human body, whether it's a donation or whether it's a surrogacy or whether it's being part of a medical, scientific trial of something. And she's saying that these things are already paid. We already, legally pay for these things. They're already accepted by society as something that we pay for. And then she shows how they are, by the same basic principle, the same as the donation, as a living organ donation. And so that's one way of using logic, is that logical comparison, saying, if this is something we already accept, and I can show you, so that's sort of like the A, right? And I can show you that the B equals that A, that what I want you to accept is the same as what we already accept, then you have no choice but to accept B, okay? So that's what she does here. Now, what's interesting is that she does it in progression. The first thing that she talks about is the least alike with the organ donation. She says payment for donation of other bodily material is legal. Sale of regenerative products, so things that we can regenerate, right? Hair, blood, semen, and they have medical risk. And so she's saying, this is something that is similar. Legal and ethical consequences of misleading buyers about the risks of disease transmitted blood and sperm or genetic legacies make this process increasingly complex. So she's saying, well, there's not a lot of medical risk and these things are regenerative, but there are some risks and the process is increasingly complex, right? So she's trying to make a comparison here. But it's not the strongest of her comparisons. She starts with her weakest and she finishes with her strongest, which makes a lot of sense. She has, as I said, it progresses through. She does say, though, it is accepted that they are sold for financial gain with disproportionate representation of the economically disadvantaged. So she's saying that people who are economically disadvantaged, who really need money, right, these are the people who, more than anyone else, sell their hair, blood, and semen. Because she knows that that is going to be one of her opponent's points, is that, if we allow payment for living organ donation, it's going to single out, it's going to focus on people who are financially disadvantaged. And she's saying, look, we already do that, right, with this. Okay, so that's her first comparison. Then she goes to a little bit stronger comparison, and she says about, the donation of human eggs. And the reason why she goes to this one is because there is more of a risk, right? It's more invasive. To talk about this. They get paid a lot, right? So the pay is higher. It's still a lot of people who tend to donate are women in financial need. So again, it's still focusing on people who are in financial need. And then she says that the chief differences between donating an egg and donating a kidney are the degree of risk of morbidity and mortality associated with the procurement process, the size of the donor's residual reserve, and the fact that only women can donate an egg. But she is saying that there are some risks involved, right? Egg donation requires both prolonged hormonal manipulation and an invasive procedure. So has traditionally appealed, blah, 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 blah. So that's something that you need to be looking at, because this is a little bit stronger, right? It is invasive. And it does, and again, and like I said, it targets the people in financial need. That's something that she keeps saying over and over again. Then she goes on to her next comparison, which is even stronger. And it might seem a little odd at first, especially when you're looking at the fact that she talks about prostitution, but she's talking about the use of intact functional body parts, right? So she's saying, not donating a piece of a body, but now she's saying basically renting out the body, right? And she said that's really no different. Renting out the body is really no different than donating a part of the body. It's still the use of the human body for financial gain. And the first one she talks about is prostitution. And the reason why she does is because it is legal in some places. And she said, and there's a lot of advocates to make it legal everywhere. So there are people advocating to make this legal, and it is more accepted. Oddly enough, it's more accepted to pay for the use of the body for sexual gratification through prostitution than it is to pay someone to donate a living organ, which is sort of ludicrous, right? And so she wants you to see that. Then she says, she also makes the comparison of surrogacy. And when she makes that comparison of surrogacy, it's a pretty strong comparison, right? Because she says that there are a lot of risks involved. The substantial risks to the surrogate mother, including transfusion, visceral prolapse, urinary incontinence, death, and immunological sensitization, make notable parallels with the purchase of a kidney from a living donor. Okay, this is really important. She's saying, look, there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of risks involved, and so this makes it a lot more similar. This is very similar to then the purchase of a kidney from a living donor. She does say, again, it also targets people who need money. She said people who become surrogates do it for one of two reasons, right? One is because they're doing it for someone they care about. And if it's not because they're doing it for someone they care about, then they're doing it to make money. And they make a lot of money off of it, right? And then it says here, now this is interesting because this really isn't her, like this part here is logos, right? But this part here is pathos. She throws some pathos in here. And she says, has the ethical acceptance of payment for surrogate motherhood been influenced by impassioned, articulate, assertive, and wealthy people who want to be parents? Or do we believe that the drive to procreate justifies donor risks? Now, it seems that doesn't really seem to fit there, but what she's trying to say is that here, the reason why people advocate to, or had advocated to make this legal, right, paying for surrogacy, is because they wanted children of their own, right, their own biological children. And she said, obviously, people who, I mean, this is what she's implying at least, is that the people who advocated for this, people who can actually afford a surrogate, are people who are wealthier, because it's a wealthier person who then pays someone who isn't as wealthy to be their surrogate. And so what she's saying here is, if you think about it, we're looking at sexual gratification or biological procreation, two things that are not necessary for survival. However, getting that donated organ, getting that organ is necessary for these people's survival, right? These recipients who are waiting could die without them. Why is that not legal to pay for them, to pay for an organ to save their lives, but it's legal to pay for someone to risk their lives to be a surrogate just because you want a biological child? Or it's okay to pay someone to risk their life being, or their health being a prostitute because you want sexual gratification. She's showing how that's really not equitable. It doesn't really make sense, does it? So that's what she's trying to point out there. But yet these things are paid for and acceptable. Now the last thing she does is she starts this last paragraph with unquestionably the strongest parallel. You should have taken note of that, right? She comes out and just smacks you with it. Unquestionably. So you cannot question her because she's saying unquestionably, the strongest parallel. And so she's saying, look, that's what I've been doing all along, making these parallels, making these comparisons. And she's saying, and here's the strongest one. So she's being very upfront. This is her strongest point. So unquestionably, the strongest parallel can be drawn with payments to volunteer participants in research studies. So again, volunteer participants in research studies. Without payment, it is unlikely that sufficient people would volunteer. Solicitations are openly advertised, blah, 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 blah. So again, she's saying, you know, people are getting paid for this. What's interesting is that she says, look at the people who are getting paid to do this. It's a wide range of people, right? So participants ranging from healthy adults to smokers, obese people, and even children younger than 3 years old. Wow, right? So she's saying, look, we're even paying for children to be part of these studies. And yet, so, right, if we're paying children to do this, but she says, look at the risks involved. Although most of these research protocols entail safe interventions, any investigation conducted to advance medicine and science may result in unexpected and even catastrophic events, as shown by recent cases in the US and UK. And then she gives like her two sources, right? So she's backing up this statement. It's not just she's throwing this out here, she has proof. So then she says, if it is reasonable, legal, and ethically justified to motivate someone using monetary reward to participate in human research, then, by extension, the same person should be allowed a monetary inducement or reward for donating an organ. She's saying they're taking the same risks. It's being used to further research or to further some sort of medical advance or further, right, make things better, right? Make someone healthier, safer, help save someone's life, whatever it might be. She's saying it's the same thing. And so if we can pay for this, and we can even pay for unhealthy people, we can pay for little children to be doing it, why can we not be paying these healthy people who are donating an organ or a part of an organ? And so this is her strongest parallel, and that's why she's putting this in here, okay? And the whole if, then, we have if it is reasonable, legal, and ethically justified to motivate someone else, blah, blah, blah. Then, by extension, so this great if, then, definitely logos. That's what she's giving you here. What's really great is right next to this use of logos, we have this chart and or this table. And she gives the different things that are being either renting or donating, right? And then whether or not the payment's legal, donor morbidity, and donor mortality. It's a great way to present this information. It's another use of visual that she gives us. And what's wonderful about it is if she tried to put all of this information into sentences, we wouldn't be reading them. They'd be complicated sentences filled with all kinds of weird statistics. It would be hard to really piece it together because they would be so far apart in the paragraph. It'd be hard to really make this comparison. So instead, she gives us this, where the comparison is so easy to see. And so this is a wonderful way to reinforce her logos, to make it very clear to her audience.